Hi everyone, in today's lesson we're going to talk about trigonometric functions that are considered cofunctions. So I'd first like to start with a definition. Two trigonometric functions are considered cofunctions if their angles are complementary. So let's write that in. Two trigonometric functions are called cofunctions if their angles are complementary. Or in other words, if their angles add to 90 degrees. Okay, just a trip down memory lane from geometry. So the pairs of cofunctions are as follows. We have sine and cosine. So sine of theta and cosine of theta are cofunctions. Tangent of theta and cotangent of theta. We have secant of theta and cosecant of theta. So let's continue with the definition. We know that sine and cosine are cofunctions if their angles are complementary. So we know that sine of theta is equal to cosine of 90 minus theta. Because this angle, 90 minus theta, and this angle have to add to 90. So in other words, I could write it with cosine. Cosine of theta is equal to sine of 90 minus theta. So now that I've given you this definition, let's do an example. So using your knowledge of cofunctions, fill in the blanks below. So we know that sine and cosine are equal if their angles add to 90. So if this is theta, or 10, then what does this have to be in here? 90 minus theta. So this has to be 80. And the way that you get that is by doing 90 minus 10. And then that's how you get 80. Okay, let's write down the definitions for tangent and cotangent. So tangent of theta is equal to cotangent of 90 minus theta. Same thing with cotangent. Cotangent of theta is equal to tangent of 90 minus theta. Alright, so here's an example. Tangent and cotangent are equal if their angles add to 90. So if this is 50, this has to be 40. And the way you get that 40 is just by doing 90 minus 50, which gives me 40. Okay, now the last rule is secant and cosecant. So secant of theta is equal to cosecant of 90 minus theta, and cosecant of theta is equal to secant of 90 minus theta. So again, if I have secant and cosecant, they're only equal if their angles add to 90. So this over here has to be 60. The way that you get that is by doing 90 minus the 30, and that gives you 60. Right up there. Okay, so let's see if we could try 4, 5, and 6. So number 4, 5, and 6 both don't have the cofunction next to it. So you first have to tell me what is the cofunction for cotangent. You should be saying tangent. What is the cofunction for cosecant? You should be telling me secant. And what is the cofunction for sine? You should be telling me cosine. So this example right here, number 4, says negative cotangent of 75. That's going to be equal to negative tangent of 15. How I got 15? I did 90 minus 75. And that's it. Now, example number 5 and example number 6 are in radian. So it would make sense if we did our answer in radian. So I would say that how to get this angle in here is by doing 90 minus this. So if we remember one of those common conversions, 90 degrees is equal to pi over 2. So if we know that, we could say 90, or pi over 2, minus pi over 3. And we can make a common denominator. This would need a 3. This would need a 2. So what would this be then? 3 pi minus 2 pi, which is 1 pi over 6. Now, you absolutely could have changed it to degree, did the math, and then converted it back to radian, which I'll do for this example. So sine of pi over 4. Let's take pi over 4 and multiply it by 180 over pi. The pi's will cancel. And when we do 180 divided by 4, we get 45. So now we do 90 minus 45, and that's nice. That's just 45. So we actually don't even have to convert it back, because if this is 45, then it's just 45 pi over 4. Okay, awesome. Let's try a little bit more challenging problems. Okay, so find the value for each that makes the equation true. So these problems you necessarily can't do in your head, but we know that cotangent and tangent are equal if this angle and this angle add to 90. So when you can't do them in your head, you have to make an equation. So we know that x minus 10 plus 4x has to add up to 90. Because remember, cotangent and tangent are cofunctions, and they're equal if this angle plus this angle add to 90. So I just make an equation. Combine like terms and solve. So x is equal to 20. And you could check your answer if you'd like, just to see that it works out. Well, so you would just plug in this 20 into the x that you got here and here. So what's this? 20 minus 10, which is 10. 4 times 20, which is 80. So definitely they're cofunctions. 80 and 10 add up to 90. Okay, so the same way we can do number 8 and we can do number 9. So what I'd like you to do is try 8 and 9 by yourselves, and then hit resume when you're ready for the answers. Okay, here are your answers. Alright, just to recap, I knew that secant and cosecant are cofunctions. So this angle plus this angle had to add to 90. So I did a plus 15 plus the 2a equals 90, and I solved. Same thing with number 9. I knew that sine and cosine were cofunctions, so I know that this angle plus this angle equals 90. So I have 3x plus 4x, that gave me 7x, and then I solved all the way through, and I got 12. Okay, now the last thing that we need to talk about is rewriting functions as positive acute angles. Now, we talked about positive acute angles before, and we used quarters or for sodas. But now, and specifically, I'm asking it to be a function of a positive acute angle less than 45 degrees. Well, let's take care of the positive acute angle first. So let's look at example number 1. So we know that we have to use quarters or for sodas, like we always have. So the quadrant that is 285 would be quadrant 4. Okay, so quadrant 4. A reference angle is found in quadrant 4 by taking 360 minus 285. And that gives me 75. And the function I'm dealing with is sine. And all students take calc. Cosine is positive, therefore sine will be negative. So we've written this as negative sine of, 75. That is the positive acute angle. 75 is the positive acute, but is it less than 45 degrees? Absolutely not. But if we know we've got cofunctions in the back of our brain, we know that negative sine of 75 is equal to negative cosine of 15. So how did I know that? Because I know that sine and cosine are cofunctions if their angles add to 90. So 75 plus 15 is 90, and 15 is less than 45. Perfect. Okay, now let's look at number 11. Number 11 is perfect because 76 is already a positive acute angle, so we don't even have to do quarters or for sodas. We just have to make it less than 45 degrees. So we know that cosine of 76 is equal to sine of what? Because I know that sine and cosine are cofunctions if their angles add to 90. So if you just do 90 minus 76, you get 14. So the answer is sine of 14. Okay, why don't you see if you could do number 12 on your own? Model number 12 just like we did number 10, and hit resume for the answer. No cheating. Okay, here's your answer. Just to review, I have quadrant 3, 265 ends in quadrant 3. My reference angle is 265 minus 180, which is 85. Tangent's positive there, so the answer for positive acute is technically tangent of 85. But that's not less than 45 degrees, so we have to use cofunctions. So cofunctions is cotangent of 5. 85 plus 5 gives me 90. Okay, now the last one and final one that I'd like to do with you is number 13. So we need to do quarters or for sodas. But first we need to figure out what this angle is. So 7 pi over 9 times 180 over pi. The pi's will cancel. Now take a minute, type that into your calculator, and see what you get. Alright, I got 140 degrees. So we know that that's an angle in quadrant 2. Looks like this. Okay. A reference angle in quadrant 2 is 180 minus 140, which is 40. The function I'm dealing with is secant. And all students take calc. Sine is positive, therefore secant is negative. So negative secant of 40. Now, is 40 less than 45 degrees? Absolutely is. But since it was given to us in radian, we should probably give it back to them in radian. So let's write 40 times pi over 180. And we get 40 pi over 180. And then we reduce the 40 out of 180 in the calculator. This part, 40 over 180. And we get 2 over 9. So the answer is negative secant of 2 pi over 9. Now this one was a great problem because the 40 was already less than 45 degrees, so I didn't have to do anything to that. Okay, so now what I'd like to do, if you have a piece of paper or if you have room to write it down, it might not be a bad idea. I want to talk about the difference between reciprocals and cofunctions. So I'm going to insert a new page here. Okay, so we learned reciprocals. And reciprocal pairs were sine theta and cosecant theta. What else? We had cosine theta and secant of theta. And we had tangent of theta and cotangent of theta. Those were my reciprocal pairs. And now today, we just learned something called cofunctions. So now we have cofunction pairs. Okay? Cofunctions are sine of theta and cosine of theta, cotangent of theta with tangent of theta, and secant of theta with cosecant of theta. So these are going to be things that unfortunately you're going to have to memorize. Remembering that reciprocals are 1 over the function, or flipping. And remember that cofunctions, their angles add to 90. Okay, so these are the two main differences between reciprocals and cofunctions. So make sure you're writing that down somewhere, and we'll start tomorrow's lesson just with that. Okay, so if you have any questions, jot them down, and we'll see you tomorrow.